Welcome to the Self Reflections podcast, where real reflections are shared by real people. Today's guest is Dr. Santina Wheat, a physician in Chicago, USA. Santina, welcome to the Self Reflections podcast. I'm looking forward to our episode today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this as well.
Could you introduce yourself to our community and give a little history of how you became a physician?
Sure, I would love to do that. So I am a family physician by training, and I also happen to be a career and life coach as well. And then I am a mom of two wonderful girls and a wife to a wonderful husband. And I am one of those people that really just said they were going to be a doctor for their entire life. So that was the thing I said I was going to do when I was about 5. And so every time someone would ask that question, what is it that you want to be in your life? I said I wanted to be a doctor. And I think that I was able to do that primarily because I had an amazing cheerleader who was my mom. And my mom felt like she didn't have a choice. There were some doctors that were women who were her age, but she felt like her only choices really were to be a nurse or a teacher. And not that there's anything wrong with those professions. They're amazing professions. But she wanted to make sure that I had every opportunity ahead of me. So she said I was supposed to do something additional, that I needed to do something more. And so she really encouraged me to be a doctor. And I was able to watch her really. She was a teacher and then a principal in her community. And I was able to see how she shaped her community and brought good to those who she worked with, not only her students, but their parents and the other teachers that she worked with. And so I was really inspired by that and thinking of how I could help families and communities as well. And so that led me into being a family doctor. So I get to do a little bit of everything. And I know not everyone has family doctors. We're general practitioners in other parts of the world. But basically, I'm the person that gets to see you anytime from when you're a newborn. If you're pregnant, I get to see you. I get to catch babies. I get to see you when you're old. I really do the full spectrum of medicine.
And that's so amazing to have, like you said, the vast connection through someone's lifespan. You know, I know some physicians just work with young people or babies, others with more mature adults, to be able to have and connect with your patients from start to sometimes the mature aged. That's such a wonderful thing to have experience with. Thank you for sharing and introducing yourself. You mentioned that your mum was a very significant and powerful person in developing who you are today and getting you into the work that you do. Can you tell me a little bit more about your parents?
Sure. So I grew up primarily with my mom. My dad and mom were not together when I grew up. And my mom was, as I mentioned, she was a teacher and then a social worker and then ultimately a principal. But she pretty much raised me on her own for most of my life. She had her sister with her. And so I had these strong females who were inspiring me to do things. And then I unfortunately had grief very young. My mom's sister passed when I was only 13. And so then it was really my mom and I. And she just encouraged me to do everything. She took me to my activities. She made sure I had the ability to get there. And while she was doing this, she was also really inspiring other people. She was helping the folks who were on her team learn to grow, and she really launched the careers of a lot of other educators. And she was somebody that would write grants and make sure that the community that she was working with had the opportunity for parents to learn English and to be able to expand and work in their communities and give their children the best support that they could. And she did all of that while somehow managing to encourage me at the same time. And then my dad was also an educator, and he was also in the Chicago public school system, and he really took many different roles in that system. And they were both really believed that education was the thing to do, that supporting communities was the right thing to do, and really did that within our city for a very long time.
I know in our discovery call you mentioned that you had lost both your parents at a young age. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what happened with our community?
Sure. So I already mentioned, I sort of feel like I lost 3 parents. I started by already saying I lost my aunt when I was 13, and that was unfortunately to breast cancer. And so she was ill very quickly. It went from diagnosis to her dying in about 6 months. And that was
Wow.
something that I experienced as a young child. I guess 13 is not that young, but as a child. And it was something that other people didn't really experience.
Mhm.
And it sort of started my journey with grief because my aunt died. And then 2 years later, we lost my grandpa. About 3 years after that, we lost my grandma. And I had more loss than most people my age had ever had before I even got to college. I'm still shocked today when people have all of their grandparents at their weddings. That was something that I never experienced. So that happened. And then I did happen to have older parents. I was a little bit of a later in life child. And so my father, he did pass when I was still in fellowship. So I did my medical school and then my 3 years of residency training. And then I did a fellowship. And it was during that year that I lost my father. He had many chronic illnesses, diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney disease, unfortunately, many of the things people suffer from, and then ultimately had dementia and made a decision as he was diagnosed with dementia to go on hospice. And so I lost him at a fairly young age when I had a very small child who was only about to turn 2 at the time, actually.
Yeah.
And at that time, I still had my mom, who was still my biggest cheerleader, still really helped really support me and my children. And then she ended up having a very rocky few years. She was born with heart disease and then also had similarly some of the chronic illnesses, the high blood pressure, the diabetes. And we spent a year really in and out of hospital stays, watching her deteriorate. And again, doing all of this while I was working as a physician, and at this point had 2 children who were very young and really loved grandma. And it was a very challenging time because I was not only watching my mom deteriorate, I was not only raising my 2 children, and I'm very thankful for the support of my amazing husband during all of this. I was also working really hard. I never really felt like I could take off because I wasn't sure. You never know when it's going to happen, and thinking I needed to work as long as I could. And while I was doing that, I was watching the sort of trials and tribulations and frustrations of my own field. So I felt like I was fighting in healthcare while I was also working in healthcare. So my mom passed in 2019, thankfully before everything happened with the COVID pandemic, because I can only imagine the additional heartache that that would have brought with it. But it was really this horrible experience of sort of watching all of the negative aspects of healthcare while still trying to be there and still
Mm.
support my kids and be there with my husband.
Mm. And that's such an interesting way to struggle because you've got the challenges, like you said, that came with being in the industry and you know needing to support people and knowing the system, but then also seeing how the struggles then created more issues for family and the people that you do love. Yeah. Thank you so much, of course, for sharing that. I can appreciate no matter how time passes, the loss of people that we love still very much pull at the heartstrings, and we do miss them every day. How did losing the people that you love shape your view of life, of success, even the way that you approached your career?
Well, absolutely. It had a very large impact. And I'll start by saying I felt like it was a very isolating experience at the
Yeah.
time. Because most people, again, I'm not that young, but I'm young for having lost both of my parents. Most people that were my friends felt like they didn't know how to talk to me about it, even because they had never experienced loss and didn't have a way to relate. They didn't have
Mm.
like sort of a barometer to measure it by. And so that was
Hmm.
interesting because I actually felt like people pulled away at a time when I could have needed a little bit more of their support. Um,
Hmm.
that being said, it's okay now, but it did really stop me and make me think, what is it that I want to do to measure my life? And I was definitely, when I lost my mom, I didn't acknowledge it at the time, but that was definitely the real the real impact of burnout. It was not just grief, it was burnout too. I mentioned how
Yeah.
it was impacting how I saw my career and what I was doing. And at the time, I did know that I needed to change. I spent some time right after her passing going and doing informational interviews and seeing what else was out there, if I even still wanted to be in clinical medicine or not. And also, one of the things that really shaped me and how I looked forward when I was able to recover was when I stood in the church and I gave the eulogy and I looked at all of the people that were in this building with me. The number of people that showed up for her, the number of people that really felt like she had touched their lives. I
Mm,
was always raised by her saying, "You need to do better than I am. It's my job as your mom to make you set up for success so that you can do better." And so I stood there thinking to myself, how do I do better than this? How do I
mm,
help this many people? How do I help this many people grow and reach their potential or have the opportunities that maybe they didn't think that they had? And it took me a while to come to terms with that. But ultimately, it was that question that helped me really think about, what is it worth? What am I doing? What is worthwhile in my career? What is worthwhile in my life?
mhm,
Unfortunately, as I was ready to come out of it, that's when the pandemic hit. So lots of things also slowed down. But ultimately, it has shaped how my family views what we do. We go on vacations more often. We spend more time together. I spend more time having fun with them. And then on the
mhm.
side, I really think about, is what I'm doing now meaningful? Am I making a difference? Am I supporting others in what I'm doing? And so I'm really able to think about those things in every decision and every choice that I make along the way.
Thank you. And I think you've highlighted a few things there in um, actually starting to pull the messages and meanings that your mum especially had shared with you in your upbringing, in how you can then replicate that in the work that you do with your patients, which is really beautiful. I think when we're aware of how impactful or what legacy someone leaves, no matter when they leave it, it really does allow us to shape our view of how we can be of service. How
Mhm.
can we provide connection and love and care in a way that then, it is not just caring for them, but it also then feels a part of our own level of belonging and an achievement, and success naturally is going to look very different to so many different people. But if you can find meaning behind the success that you engage in, that I think is just the pinnacle of what success can truly be as a whole. Mm.
Absolutely. And then it shapes how I present what I'm doing to my
Yeah.
girls. It shapes how I show them what is possible, what their potential might be. So, not just them, also my learners as well. I primarily educate within the healthcare space, but I really think it changes how I present what I'm doing. It's not necessarily in a way to brag about what I'm doing, but to show others
Mm.
that it's possible.
Mhm. You work in medicine, and a profession we know is known for its long hours, high stakes, and emotional weight that comes with it all. At what point did you start to recognize burnout creeping in? Because you mentioned burnout in the grief sense, but you also mentioned that you were working while also then experiencing grief and the loss of your family. Like, when did it actually start to surface in and because of your work role?
Yeah, so I will say I didn't acknowledge it for a very long time. I didn't
Yeah.
understand that I was experiencing burnout. And I think that's really important because I think in a field where you're caring for others, I think that's not
Mm,
just medicine. I think that that
mm,
is I think that's teaching. I think that that's social work. I think that that's so many different places. But in spaces where we are caring for others, we know that we're walking into this field trying to give of ourselves. And so we expect a little bit to be exhausted at the end of the day because we know that we're pushing out. And I just thought that that was part of the job. I just thought that that was how
mm.
it was, that it was supposed to be that, like, I was just going to work really hard and then I was going to get home and be exhausted. And that was the life I had chosen.
Was
But
it
I
just exhaustion that you were feeling, or was there other, like, what did it start to look like for you in detail?
Yeah, so I acknowledge the exhaustion. What it
Yeah.
also looked like though was the mood. It was the being a little bit snippy with other people. And some of that was very hard to distinguish, particularly in the face of grief, because some of it was definitely grief, but some of it was the burden
Mm,
too. It was
mhm.
the there were the physical symptoms too. I've always been a person that gets headaches, but they increased. And it probably wasn't just that I'm a person that gets headaches. It was that I was putting myself in systems or in situations where it was
Yeah.
more likely for me to feel that way. And then there's one thing that I look back on now that I didn't acknowledge before, but I am a serious introverted person by nature. And I started getting all of this feedback that I was too cold or I was too mean or that I wasn't smiling enough. And I ignored the smiling one most of the time because I think that's something that just sort of happens in culture for women in particular. And I don't like that answer. But the thing about the being cold wasn't that was fair. And it wasn't that I was intentionally being cold. I am a warm person. I care a lot about people, but it was my way of holding myself in a silo. It was my way of holding myself in. And that was also a sign of burnout that I couldn't let myself feel the emotions, either the good or the bad. And that maybe I wasn't receiving that feedback in the best way, but that was a that I was going through that and that I needed to change. It was
Mhm.
also when I started noticing my children be a little bit more hesitant around me, like that they sometimes they would get anxious that I was going to be mad. And some of that is a little bit of just anxiety, personalities that we're trying to work through. But some of that was me too, was that sometimes I was snapping when I shouldn't. Um, and I knew that I was on my way to feeling better when I could catch it. I could catch that, oh, that wasn't just hangry. That was also me being a little bit snippy because I haven't taken care of myself. And oh, yeah, the hangry part, that is something too, because that means that I'm not taking care of myself. It means that I'm not ensuring that I've eaten or had enough water and that it's impacting my interactions. And so it was really the ability to interact with others that was meaningful. And then there was one other thing there. I went through a really hard year with a really hard group of folks and they graduated. And some of it was sometimes you just get people that you don't click with. But after they graduated, somebody else that I worked with went, "Oh, Dr. Wheat, you look like you are 5 years younger all of a sudden." And it was something about the way that I was carrying myself. And I was like, huh, one, it's a little bit strange that you say that. I'm glad that I look 5 years younger now, but also what is going on in my life and how am I taking care of myself that I am letting other people impact me that much? How can I
Mhm.
show up every day and not feel like I'm 5 years older than I am?
Mhm. And what you've described there are such, great details of what burnout can look like in someone's life. We throw around the term so freely, and sometimes being able to be specific on exactly how we feel, exactly how it shows up, exactly what people notice, it allows then our community to understand how they can watch for these signs within themselves. Because sometimes it's years before we acknowledge that we're spiraling into burnout, we're just minimizing it and saying we're busy, we're just, frantic. Oh, I always am forgetful, or I always, going to get into these mood states, which we don't want to, minimize in any way, but it's important for us to call a spade a spade.
Mhm.
And when we look at burnout, it's not just about that exhaustion, it's that loss of meaning, emotional numbness, and depletion of motivation that comes with it too. And the amount of stress that we actually hold in our nervous system shows on our body, and we look fatigued more. Our skin becomes more depleted of moisture. We naturally will experience more wrinkles. Our body holds or retains water differently. We experience bloating differently. So the amount of physical then exhaustion that you can physically see as well is so significant. And I love that you were able to also include that as what was happening for you you, because it's not just, oh, I feel tired. It's, this is exactly how I experience it, and my body will show it in it. And in your case, it was that you looked 5 years older during the experience of certain environments or people or times in your life, versus when you no longer were engaging in that.
Absolutely. And I think that you said something that's really important about the lack of motivation, the lack of care.
Yeah.
And I think that that was one. And I think that was one for me that I didn't recognize also at first. It was the lack of care, I'll say, about my appearance, because I've never been
Mm.
somebody who really cared about my appearance, but I really didn't care. And some of that
Yeah.
was because of the pandemic and always wearing a mask. But even as we came out of that, it still didn't seem to matter. And as I had to think about, well, what's changed? I have all these beautiful clothes. I have all this beautiful jewelry that I used to wear. Why don't I care anymore? That was actually a sign to me. It was one of those things that I don't usually see in the textbook about burnout, but was an external
Mm.
sign for me that it wasn't just about not caring about work or going out with my friends. It was about not caring about myself.
Completely agree with that. And we want to normalize that everyone is going to have different experiences of what their burnout looks like. And when we stop caring for ourselves and things start to deteriorate, that's your biggest red flag of something's not right. If you stop nourishing yourself, if you, stop washing your hair, or choosing the things that you'd normally put on because you bought those pieces because they brought you joy, or you loved them, all of a sudden that's no longer there. There's usually something going on in the background that's leading to that behavior change. It's those little intricate things that we can start to help our community see, hey, something might be brewing, please get help and guidance on how you can work through this. Thank you for sharing that with us. Being in a male-dominated field adds another layer of pressure. How did gender dynamics play into your stress and the way you approached your work?
Yeah, so I already mentioned a little bit about the smiling, and there's a different expectation about how you carry yourself. And I don't carry myself that way. I don't carry myself as the smiley person at all times, even now when I'm feeling better. And so I've had to learn to adapt to that, which is a little bit frustrating to feel like you have to be someone different. But I'm the type of person that has to write an email and then go back to the front and remember to include all of the greetings and the pieces that are a little bit more personable. I'm the person that has had to think about stopping and chatting and getting to have more of the chit chat and not just sort of stop and get things done. And that has been a really great thing. It means that I get to know the people that I'm working with better. It means that they view me differently, but it was an extra step. It was something that my male colleagues didn't necessarily have to do along the way. Um, there's also been more, I've been very fortunate to have some wonderful female mentors. And so they have really supported me throughout the way. But there's been some male mentors that thought they were mentoring me that sometimes were actually providing recommendations that made it harder, or that indicated they didn't think I could do it. Or there were the times where someone didn't want to ask me if I wanted a new position or a new opportunity just because I had young children, whereas that same question wouldn't have shown up to my husband. I have been very fortunate to lean into this a little bit and have been able to do a fair amount of research and writing about how we promote women. And so I have taken the negatives of it and used it as positive opportunities to think about, how can we make this better? How can we ensure that evaluations are more objective and not just about, is she smiling enough? And ensure that people get the same opportunities that males might traditionally get within the field. And it's something
Mm.
still keep track of. I unfortunately think we're not far enough. And it's something we'll have to continue to fight for a while.
Mm. And I think you've highlighted there as well, and this is backed by studies too, that show women in male-dominated fields often experience higher expectation, less room for error, and need to prove themselves, which, as we know, accelerates stress and burnout. So it really does connect with with that from your own personal experiences of it, but then what also studies show, particularly in male dominated fields.
And it's especially challenging when you feel like you have to be a perfectionist in a field like this. You feel like you have to
Mm,
always get it right. And we also know that when you always use a perfectionist mentality, you won't be okay. You have to accept those
yeah.
times of good enough and you have to be able to separate them. But it's really hard to learn that when you feel like
Mm,
everything else is saying, oh, you have to be better than your male counterparts. You have to work even harder
mm.
in order to get the same praise or the same experiences.
Mm. Burnout is so common in high achieving professionals and professions, but it's often seen as a normal part to the job. Santina, did you find that people around you minimized it? Like, what made you finally acknowledge that something actually had to change?
I do think that it was very normal around me. And I think that it was, we just have to get through this. And there was always the, oh, it'll get better when your children are older, or it'll get better when we get through this
Yeah.
healthcare crisis. Unfortunately, those crises don't ever go away, it seems. It seems like there's always another one. So then the question becomes, how do you have it as a marathon and not a sprint? But unfortunately for me, it came to, was I going to leave clinical medicine? And was I going to leave the thing that I had spent my entire life saying that I was going to do and training for? And that was a wake up call. And it
Mm.
was a real decision point of, would it be better for me and my family to leave medicine?
Mhm.
Or is there a way to take care of myself and to present myself in the workplace such that I don't need to leave clinical medicine, that I can find more joy while I'm there and at home? And fortunately, I was able to find a path where I could stay in clinical medicine. But it was definitely, I definitely felt like I was on a ledge that I had to determine that as a decision. And unfortunately, I think many people make the opposite choice. They choose to leave medicine. And that's okay. It's the right choice for them. It just makes me sad that we've gotten to this point that so many people have worked so hard for their careers and are leaving it because of the predominance of burnout.
Mm. And I think the culture of overwork often frames burnout as weakness rather than a systemic issue. And recognizing burnout requires genuinely stepping out of that hustle mindset, which can be so incredibly difficult for some because it's so promoted within the industry in itself, right? It's from medical school to then being a resident, then getting out into the field. Like that in itself is this constant beratement of you don't stop, you keep seeing patients, you don't provide that quality care because there's so much pressure to have to see so many individuals in a short amount of time. And and I think the hustle mindset in itself is across the board in today's society, which again is not necessarily a bad thing if you're able to create a level of understanding that you're stepping into the hustle mindset and stepping out of the hustle mindset. But when it's your everyday, and like you said, pair that with perfectionism, pair that with overwhelm, not feeling confident to be able to, create balance within the environment that you're working in, of course, certain people are going to feel like they can't win in that industry and they have to then step out. So it takes a lot to push through that, not only, to try and make small changes within the industry, but also then to make changes within yourself because there's only so much that we can control and do.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
mm,
And I think you're right. And I think it's so hard because as you mentioned, the hustle mindset and the perfectionism, they got us so far, right? They
yeah.
they are what allowed us to succeed through our entire educational journey and to reach success. The challenge though is you get there, you get to that success, you get that position, and so many people feel like, well, I'm here. Why aren't I
Mm,
happier? And it's
mhm.
because we haven't taken the time to stop and appreciate those pieces that we don't know how to show gratitude to ourselves. We don't know how to take those small moments because we haven't been taught how to do it along the way. It was originally taught as a weakness. And it's hard because the hustle mindset still really is important. Like you said, it is still important to have a bit of stress. I should worry about my patients' abnormal labs. It's still an important part of my job to care and to be worried and to be stressed. But the key is to figure out the way to do that without letting it overtake everything.
Welcome to Self Reflections, real people, real reflections. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to do it alone. We're not just your average service. A space to come home to yourself one session at a time. A sanctuary where you feel seen, heard, and held. We meet you where you are, online or in person. Providing support across the lifespan from little ones to adults. Nurturing your mind, body, and relationships. Real people, real reflections. Book now at selfreflections.com. You know, as a working mother, you also had added pressure of juggling home and career. How did burnout show up in your personal life as well? And you kind of mentioned that the symptoms and that, but when you were acknowledging the burnout in your, you know, because of the grief initially, then in your professional career, and then it bled into your personal life, you know, many women experience burnout in all avenues, no matter where, you know, it's not just beautifully contained to, okay, well, it's just happening at work, so therefore it will, you know, I'm just going to leave it there. You naturally are going from one high stake to another high stake situation where it's going from grief to motherhood to your work role as a physician. Like, you're bouncing around. Like, how does one do that? And yeah, how did you do that, and what were some of the things that even now work really beautifully for you in connecting with them should you notice the signs of burnout creeping again?
Yeah, so I will say it was horrible at the beginning, despite the fact that I had a lot of help at home. My husband really is the person that splits household stuff, and maybe does more than I do, even if I'm honest. And so I am not starting with doing everything all by myself at home. But I also have very active children and a very active husband. So we do have chaos in our home life too. And the way that it was originally showing up, as I already mentioned, was being snippy at home, being snippy with my children when they didn't deserve it, and also sleeping a whole lot. I was exhausted all of the time. And maybe it was they would crawl into bed with me and we would watch TV together because that was about all I had the energy to do. And that was fine at the time when they were young. They were happy to snuggle with mom and to do that. But as I've come through this, and as I'm much better now, I have made myself I put goals in my life all over the place, and I always have both personal and professional goals. It's one of my keys to success. And one of the goals that I started doing that I think was the best decision ever was I made a decision that I was going to spend at least 2 times a month solo with each of the people in my house. And so that means that each of my daughters gets alone time with me and my husband gets alone time with me, with the goal being 2 times a month. It's not always perfect, but it's been pretty good since I've set this as a goal. And what I found was it helped me for a couple of reasons. I briefly mentioned that I was an introvert. And so being all of us together all the time was a little bit more draining. And two of my household members are extroverts. So what we needed were different from each other. But I was able to spend time with each of my kids solo, which was better for them. There was less fighting. And so I was getting less frustrated. And they were happy that they got one on one time with mom. And I was able to help my relationship with my husband. Even if it's just us going out and chatting and spending time together, that's just such an amazing time for someone that I chose to spend my life with. And it's easy for that to get lost in the midst of. And so that was the most important thing I did was my husband and I, we still take trips together by ourselves. We find somebody else to watch our kids. I will take one kid by ourselves. We'll go to a movie sometimes it's something even silly. Like my oldest daughter has a series of shows we're watching together, and she'll come down in the basement with me, and I'll be on the treadmill and we'll be watching it on the big TV together and talking about it. And it's just our time, and we're chuckling about what's happening on the TV. And it doesn't have to be anything big, but it was really
Mm.
creating intentional moments. And most of the things that I
Mhm.
have found that have been meaningful are all about intentionality. And that really changed what it was for our family. We also spent
Mm.
together, going out to dinner, having dinner together at home, um, with fair regularity to ensure that we're staying together as a unit, and having at least two big trips together as a family every year to have those memories. Because after the grief and after the feelings of burnout, knowing that these are the days that I can never get back, that I need to have enjoyment, that the bad days that I still have are what help pay for the good days that we're able to have. Having the something to look forward to is also meaningful and helpful in this journey.
Mm, mm. We find, or I find in my work, that generational trauma and stress patterns are often unconsciously passed down. Parents who prioritize self-care and emotional awareness give their kids the tools to regulate their own stress in the future. Having children would be something that naturally there would be this awareness of, I need to change my mindset on stress management. I need to promote my own self-care for the benefit of them. How do you model better techniques for them now, by applying self care to yourself while you're busy in managing the chaos of home and the chaos then of being a physician?
Well, some of it is them just we have a home gym and they see us doing that. They see the food that we're
Mm,
preparing. That is some of the self-care that we have. Some of it is, okay, we're turning everything off at this time because it's time to go to bed.
yeah.
Those things are all super basic, but they're also very meaningful.
Mm,
And I have a 9-year-old who sometimes doesn't like it when my husband and I leave. And I'll have a conversation with her and I say, here's the thing. Mom and dad have to go out together by ourselves because that relationship is important. Just like it's important for me to spend time with you. And so we talk about it. We have those conversations. And similarly, when she has a day off of school and I'm going to work, I say, Mom really loves her job. Mom really appreciates getting to help other people and providing this care. And
mm,
guess what? That job is also what helps us go on that amazing vacation that we just got back from, or that one that we're planning. And so we talk about
mm,
the cause and effect. We talk about the benefits, and also um, try to instill the pride of some of the accomplishments that come up. And I think it's working because I see my girls have that pride and take care of themselves too in ways that I don't think I was capable of doing when I was their age.
mhm,
I don't think I wasn't
mhm.
take care of myself. I didn't have some of the same tools that I have now that I've been able to teach them.
I love that. And I think it highlights that burnout recovery isn't just about doing less, it's about rewiring how we relate to productivity, rest, and self worth. It's not an overnight fix, and it's a long journey of unlearning and rebuilding. And what you have found is unique to your experience and your connection to your family. And it sounds like even just those little steps that one can take is actually then going to reclaim well-being, connection, and a unit of support where you're not minimizing that burnout can still be part of your everyday, or that chaos can be part of your everyday. It's just acknowledging that, how do I help them understand what this is and be able to create ways that every now and then we find those pockets of joy and connection and calm? Because yeah, we're not saying that, okay, once we get hit with burnout, it's this beautiful recovery process, right?
Right.
It's the reality of the situation is we're engaging in the world that is going to be fast paced, is going to have expectations. We can do as much reading or education as we possibly can to be aware of it. The reality is we still have one foot in the world that we are living in. And so I really love the way that you were able to identify that there's this beautiful acknowledgement of the reality, but
Mhm.
also then trying to make these little changes in ways that your children and your family unit can actually still connect and have moments that are pure in and among the chaos that is life.
And the other thing that we do that if families aren't doing this, that I strongly recommend is my husband and I will occasionally look at our calendar and be like, oh my gosh, the next 2 weeks are going to be absolute chaos. And so we will
Mm,
sit down with our kids and say, the next 2 weeks are going to be absolute chaos. This is what's going to happen. And we know that sometimes when mom and dad aren't sleeping as much as they should, they're a little bit snippier than they should be. So I just want to say I'm sorry if I'm snippy in advance. I will
mm,
try to catch myself and apologize. But we normalize the fact that we aren't perfect, and that knowing that when you can identify those times when you're not going to be your best self, it allows you to have, again, a little bit more awareness, a little bit more intentionality to catch yourself in those bad moments so that you can take
mm.
care of yourself, or give permission to somebody else to tell you you're in one of those bad moments so you can go do something to take care
Mm.
of yourself.
I love that you said not your best self, right? And so many times I too have fallen into the trap of not aligning with how I want to show up, you know, whether it's for my podcast guests or for my husband or for my doggies or for my clients in my psychology sphere. Like there's naturally, you know, we want to be so many different things to so many different people,
Mhm.
and naturally when we are under the pump and feeling overwhelmed and frazzled, you are going to prevent you are going to limit how you show up in each of those parts, you know, or moments in your life. And it's not to say that that's a bad thing or that you're not enough or not working hard enough. It's then the reality of it's beautifully human
Mhm.
for us to not be our best version 24/7.
Yes.
And what we want to be acknowledging is being kind and compassionate to ourselves in those moments when we do notice or receive feedback that something's off, or you know, when we're not aligning with who we know we are or what people know us to be. And when we are under pressure, even our emotions are under pressure. So sometimes
Mhm.
that may feel like you know, a stabbing in the heart of, you know, one other thing we need to consider that I'm not controlling or being aware of. And we just want to, again, just be very, very kind and considerate to our experience. Your awareness of reminding yourself that you're not your best self, or someone reminding you, is just those early things that are gonna try and get you to awaken and acknowledge,
Mhm.
for you to slowly start to make changes when you can. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean immediately, but it's just acknowledging that one, you're naturally going to fall and you're not going to be your best self in everything that you do. When you notice that that no longer serves you, be kind and gentle to yourself. Ask yourself why or what has happened for me to have spiraled to a point where I'm not my best self.
Mhm.
And is there anything that I can do at the moment that just a tiny, tiny little thing that can get me back on track? Or can I maybe, you know, connect with my support system,
Mhm.
or sit down and even plan for when I can maybe start to apply some of those things, if right now might not be the right time. So, you know, I just want to normalize that kind of recovery process for people. Sometimes we're so, you know, we spiral so much out of control and we don't even realize that it's happening. And other times it's smacking us in the face. But I really, like I mentioned, love the way that you were able to identify that as, this is not my best self, you know, and even just having that for our community to go back to. Am I acting in my best, you know, with my best intentions as my best self? And if not, how can I practice compassion to that and be curious as to why not?
Yes. And I think it's important to, like you said, remember that this journey is not a straight line. There are steps forward and steps backward. I love the view of it as a squiggly line, that your pathway to success for whatever it is not straight, but it is filled with twists and turns. And for showing up how you want to show up is exactly the same way. And I think that just normalizing the fact that, okay, there's going to be that bad day and I'm going to react poorly, and that's okay. because I'm going to figure out what was that thing that caused me to react poorly so I can think about how can I show up differently next time. And
Mm.
when I can really think about it, can take the time and apologize to that person that I didn't show up well with and ensure that that relationship stays strong.
Mm. I often know that burnout warps perception. It often makes us feel limited and change feel completely impossible. One of the first steps we know is expanding our perspective on what is possible. But if we were to give our listeners or community some hope and guidance, especially if someone listening right now is in the middle of burnout, but they don't see a way out, what would you say to them?
I think that it is amazing how much the small little things really can shape your experience and pull you out of burnout. And most of the things that I encourage people to do are small things. It's like, can you write 3 sentences about what you're grateful about today? If you do that in the morning, it shapes the way that you start the day. Or if you do it at nighttime, it shapes the way you go to sleep and then maybe you wake up better. And I everybody told me that I had to be mindful when I was in the worst of burnout, that I had to do mindfulness. And I thought that that just meant meditation. And I was like, I don't meditate. My brain doesn't slow down. That's not possible for me.
Yeah.
And then one day, this is going to sound super silly, I was doing a challenge where I needed to do something on my workout app every day. And so one day I decided I was going to listen to a meditation, even though I didn't think meditation worked for me. And I put it on in the shower. And it was like a game changer for me. All of a sudden, I had this space where nobody was interfering. My children weren't bothering me. And I was standing there for 5 minutes anyhow. And it was this perfect place that I could let everything go away and just sort of listen to what was saying. And it wasn't my idea of what I thought meditation was and sitting in the perfect position and the perfect pillows and totally clearing my mind. My mind didn't clear, but I had this opportunity to be mindful. And
Mhm.
it's little things like that that can really shift your view. And so my my advice is don't discount the small changes and the impact that it can have on how you will feel.
Thank you. And to add to that, I want to highlight that, when we are in burnout and things feel so dire, we don't see that it's ever going to change. So to add to that, I want to add a message that you we got into burnout by doing things, by environment being a certain way. And it's an experience of something that doesn't have to last, and it won't last, right? It's about acknowledging that we have the power and the control, and while it might not feel like that in the moment, it feels very hopeless, and we feel like, there's nothing that we will do to create change. I just want to instill that hope that it's not going to last forever.
Mhm.
And if you yourself can practice curiosity and really, really ascertain what led you to that burnout, you can slowly start to build your way out of that. And if that is challenging, of course, connect to family, friends, professionals that are going to help, because sometimes we're in such a dark hole. And all we do is just keep digging deeper and deeper. Someone needs to come into that hole and pull us out, even just a little bit, for us to start seeing the light, right? For us to feel like, oh my goodness, I can actually breathe. I can actually get myself out and actually start pulling ourselves out of that hole ourselves. I just want to, highlight that there is a reason why you're there. You're not going to be there forever,
Mhm.
and you're going to be able to make your way out of that, even if right in this very moment you might not believe it to be true.
Absolutely. And I think that what I didn't know before, or that I didn't internalize before, was that there was always one little step that I could take to put me on that path. There was always one small thing that I could do. I kept thinking that the world just had to change for me to feel better. And well, yes, I would love the world to change. I still realize that one small step can get you on your pathway out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What's one piece of advice you wish you had known earlier about burnout, grief, or work-life balance? I know they're three separate topics, um, but if you were to, I guess, pick one that resonates with you the most from today's episode, what would be, I guess, the advice you wish you had known earlier?
Yeah, so I do actually think that I have one piece of advice that sort of spans all three of them, actually. And that is that your season of life is going to change. And
Mm.
I say this for all of these things because it shifts what your priorities are. And I didn't
Mm.
really acknowledge that. And this goes back to my being driven, perfectionist tendencies from before, of thinking that that thing that I said that I was going to do when I was 22 was exactly what I should be doing right now. And that's not real. Sure, maybe one day that job that I said I wanted is still something I'll fight for, but in your season of life, your priorities change. It changed when my children were little. It changed when I had no children. It changed when I needed to find something different at work. And allowing that to happen is really important. Acknowledging that your priorities will shift over time and that what you thought 10 years ago was the perfect scenario might not actually be that when you're living it is okay. It is okay to know that your priorities will shift.
Thank you. And where can people find your work or connect with you if they would like to learn more or hear more about your story?
Absolutely. So you can find me at my website, which is www.santina, Santina, wheat, wheat.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at the same name, Santina Wheat, and you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Dr. Tina Wheat. Tina is my nickname that I go by, and so you can find me there too.
Well, Tina, thank you so much for your time today. Being able to connect to something that we all experience, burnout, through your unique story of navigating grief and family and motherhood, and then being in an industry that's predominantly male dominated. Your vulnerability has allowed us to learn so much and also be able to see parts of ourselves through that story. And hopefully, we can definitely, through that sharing, allow people to connect with and then make some beautiful changes for themselves. Tina, thank you very much for the work that you do and your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you, of course, as always, to our community. Thank you for tuning into the Self Reflections podcast. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Until next time, take care and keep reflecting.